It's all about keeping it smaller than you think it is. So it's not about going to the gym for an hour every day when you're stressed. Forget it. Your amygdala and prefrontal cortex will be duking it out for that one. No way, you're not going to go. It's like you're wading through molasses to put your sneakers on. But if you start small and say, I'm going to go for a 5-minute walk today, you'll do it.
But sometimes it's so small that it's almost humiliating. It's so small that it seems trivial. That's how it feels, right? For 2 minutes, what's that going to do? 2-minute walk? That's going to do nothing.
Trust the process.
I'm not going to lose any belly fat with 2 minutes.
It's not about losing belly fat. So the cosmetic promise of fitness has never propelled any of my patients from going from lifelong non-exercisers to exercisers. Taut bellies, muscular physiques, never the reason people exercise. People start exercising because those are all aspirational things. It's like they're out of reach. Most people who exercise, at least in my experience, who I have been able to convince to exercise, they exercise because of the mental health promise, not the physical health promise. In turn, they might have some weight loss. We know that even if you exercise on a regular basis and have no weight reduction whatsoever, you are still improving your cardiovascular health, your metabolic health, all of the other profiles. You can still improve even without any weight change. What my thing is about stress, right? So mental health. So that's just the physical health aspect of it. Even just a 2-minute walk can make a difference in your biology of stress.
What is the evidence that shows exercise helps with stress management? What is the research?
Reams of research on exercise helping with stress. And the real misconception is that you have to do a lot of exercise to manage stress. And that is unequivocally false. Even a little bit of exercise can help because it gets you out of your head and into your body. A few minutes here and there can make all the difference. Park far away when you're driving someplace and you're going to a restaurant or you're going into a mall, a shopping center. Park far and walk if you can. Build it into your day throughout the day. Take the stairs if you can. It is just small incremental changes over the course of a day. Aim for 20-minute walk. It has lots of health benefits. It gets you out of your head into your body. It gets you into that daily habit of movement. Initially, when you are a sedentary person and a lifelong non-exerciser, going into the gym to exercise is like a complete deterrent. I remember as a medical resident, when I was going through my stress struggle, I had a state-of-the-art gym in my building. I remember being incredibly stressed and, I'm a doctor. I was like, oh yeah, exercise is good for me. I walked into the gym. I saw the mirrors. I saw all of the fancy equipment, the techno music blasting. I walked right out. I then started a walking regimen simply because it was nice out one day and I walked around the block. And then I was like, oh, that felt really nice. Next day, I walked around the block and then some. Did a 5-10 minute extra walk. And then the next day, it was manageable. It was a low lift. It was easy for me to do. It wasn't like all this complicated equipment. So I walked a little bit more and I just gradually moved up over the course of a week or two to 20 minutes. And then I committed to a 20-minute walk. Over time, my self-efficacy, which is that ability of you to know like, oh, I can do this, it increased. And that's what happens when you exercise and you do something like this, something small, a little bit every day. Your sense of self-efficacy increases. So you feel like, oh, I can do this. And your inner critic starts silencing. And
People
then I started walking.
Just the walkers, not the extreme exercises, just the walkers. You're telling me there's research that shows those people are less stressed in their lives and more resilient per se?
It's not so much that walkers are less stressed. It's that movement, when you go from being sedentary to moving, that the daily physical activity, even at low levels, can help decrease your stress. So it's not like
Why and how?
So many reasons. So the first reason is because something like walking is something that's a very natural phenomenon that all of us do. We don't really feel like walking. When we are feeling a sense of stress, you just want to be still. But science shows that, you've heard of the expression sitting is the new smoking. You've heard of that expression. Yeah. But a research study found that sitting can also increase your sense of anxiety. So it's not so much that sitting is the new smoking per se, yes, but it also has a tremendous impact on your actual mental health. And that movement is a antidote to that. So it's not necessary that you have to do excessive exercise, but even just a simple walk, getting out, low-grade exercise has been shown to help with longevity. It's been shown to help with so many markers of health, just a simple walk. And yes, your team, people like to run. I'm not saying that like you can continue running, but that's someone who is like a avid exerciser. And so they run. Some people walk. It doesn't really matter what you do. It's that you do something you enjoy a little bit every day.
So many people have that subtle, you talked about it at the start as well, that subtle humming of stress and anxiety in their life. It's just kind of like a background noise of their life. I have that sometimes. Often I have that subtle angst. One of the things that's really helped me, which you talk about in the book, is breathing and learning some practical breathing techniques, because you don't need to go to, a therapist or go to some yoga class to do breathing on your own, especially sort of short breathing techniques. What is the most effective breathing technique that anybody listening to this right now that has a little sense of angst could adopt instantly and repetitively as a habit in their lives that you've seen and that has been proven to be most effective in reducing that subtle angst?
2. First, diaphragmatic breathing. It's how we all breathe as babies, and somewhere in our adulthood or young adulthood, we lose our ability to innately do diaphragmatic breathing. But if you watch babies, diaphragmatic breathing is belly breathing or deep belly breathing.
When people say belly breathing, I need you to explain this to me. How do I know if I'm doing it right?
Put your hand on your belly.
Yeah.
One hand on your heart or one hand on your belly or both hands on your belly, since we're doing diaphragmatic breathing. And then you're going to take a deep breath in. Let your belly expand. Here, you're expanding your chest. But what I want you to do is expand your belly and then let it out with your lips. Purse your lips and get it out. So you're always inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth or your nose, but you're doing it very slowly. So what you did initially is that you went
with my chest.
With your chest. And that's not diaphragmatic breathing per se. What you're trying to do is just expand your belly and then let it fall. And you want to get into somewhat of a natural breathing pattern. You're forcing it right now because we're doing this immersive instructional moment. But you can then, as you get better at it, you can put your hand on your belly, both hands. And as you're hanging out, talking to me, just let your belly rise and fall.
Is there a speed in which I need to exhale?
Not necessarily. You want to be as slow as possible. Some people, in some yogic traditions say like the exhale should be double than the inhale. The reason that breathing is truly a game changer when it comes to your stress response is because the breath is the only physiological mechanism in our body that is under voluntary and involuntary control. So as you're writing down right now, you are breathing. Your body is breathing. You're not even thinking about it. And then suddenly, if I say, hey, Stephen, want to try diaphragmatic breathing again? You can voluntarily start breathing again. It is the only bodily mechanism that is under voluntary and involuntary control. Your heart can't do that. Your brain waves can't do that. Your digestion can't do that. It's all involuntary, right? It's just happening. But the breath is the one thing that you can control and then let go, and it does it on its own. And the reason the breath is so powerful at mitigating the stress response and decreasing it is because when you are feeling a sense of stress and the fight or flight response, your breath involuntarily is short, in your chest, and rapid. It's like this. Right? You're stressed, your heart's beating. And that's also a physiological mechanism because your body's trying to get oxygen and you're anxious and your catecholamines and your cortisol and your heartbeat is racing. So you're breathing quick. And that is called fight or flight. That is the sympathetic nervous system. Your sympathetic and parasympathetic system can't be on at the same time. So when you start forcing yourself to take deep belly breaths, you switch your mode into the parasympathetic system. And that is called the rest and digest system. And then that is what starts calming down your stress response in the moment. And the second important breathing technique that I would really suggest people try is stop, breathe, and be. It's a way to tap into your mind-body connection, and it can be really helpful. And the way you do that is, it was the first technique I learned, and you essentially just stop, whatever you're doing, breathe and be. It's 3 seconds. Typically it's done. I did it when I was first starting as a busy medical resident. I did it right before I would knock on the patient's door of the exam room, and I would turn the knob. So I would stop, breathe, and be. I would knock and walk in. You can do it right before your Zoom meeting. Mundane, repetitive tasks is when stop, breathe, and be works best. You can do it throughout the day. You tap into your mind-body connection. You get a sense of presence. You take that mental break, and then you go on. So for you, Stephen, with your crazy schedule of not having even a moment, you could try stop, breathe, be before or after every single meeting as a bookend.
We talked about speaking to people when you're experiencing stress, but one of the things I read about in your book is the importance of writing, therapeutic writing, and how that plays a really wonderful role in limiting our stress. Is there any research that supports the fact that if I just go home and write, that I'll experience less stress? And if so, what is the research and what's going on there?
Yes, there's plenty of research. A wonderful researcher, psychologist named James Pennebaker from the University of Vanderbilt developed a technique called expressive writing, also known as therapeutic writing. And the instruction is essentially for 4 days, write for 20 to 25 minutes, set a timer, and just write. No one's going to see it. Just write about a traumatic event that happened to you. So whatever that trauma may be, I talk about it in the book. It's like one of my patients who had a traumatic event, or if something's gone on this week for you that you want to work out, it doesn't have to be some deep-seated trauma. It can be like you had an argument with your girlfriend, you had something come up at work, you were stressed about a project, or you're getting into an argument with your parent or your child or whatever it may be. You just set a timer on your phone if you wish, or a old-fashioned alarm clock, or your oven if you don't want to use your phone. Set a timer for 20 minutes or 25 minutes. Sit down with a piece of paper and a pen and just start writing about the event. And then when the timer ends, you stop. And then the next day you do it again. 4 consecutive days, you might notice an uptick in your distress on day 2 or day 3, and then it will just decrease. That therapeutic writing has been shown to be effective for so many things. It can be helpful for your mood and sleep and anxiety and irritability. It's been shown to be helpful in studies to increase your GPA, to decrease hospital admissions. It's wild what therapeutic writing has been shown to do. It's called expressive writing. And
what's going on there in the brain? What's going on in the body? What's making it's so therapeutic?
I think one of the things that is happening is that you had mentioned this earlier, I think one of the things that's happening is likely cognitive reframing. So first, you are on day 1, and I've done this many, many times. I practice therapeutic writing on a regular basis. On day 1, as you're writing, it's your amygdala speaking, right? It's like your self-preservation and survival and your inner critic, and you're like blasting whatever issue is happening. And then as you go through day 2, 3, and 4, I think you're creating a safe space. You're processing a lot of your emotions. It's very important to process a lot of your emotions, and you're not keeping them stuck. You're, expressing yourself. And then I think you're coming to your own conclusions. So there's probably many, many things, active things that are happening in your brain. You are moving away from amygdala to prefrontal cortex because you're thinking, strategizing, organizing your ideas. You're expressing yourself. We know that writing and journaling is also very helpful. Why? Because it is a way to express yourself and let these nebulous ideas become concrete words and thoughts and feelings. And then I think there's an element of self-efficacy and a sense of agency happening too, because you are solving your own issue or figuring out a new angle, a new perspective, and you're looking at yourself, hopefully by the end, through a lens of self-compassion, which is also something that happens.
There was a study in your book about how just taking even a 10-second break from your work can have an impact on your stress levels.
You know how we say, you'll often hear like, oh, just take a break. And, because we often, when we're feeling a sense of burnout, an atypical burnout, an inability to disconnect from work, right? And then it's like, how are you going to get yourself back on track? I call it the Goldilocks principle. I talk about it in the 5 resets. Human productivity functions on a curve. It's not linear. It's not like, okay, like I'm going to just keep being productive. There's actually a bell-shaped curve for stress, as there is a bell-shaped curve for human productivity. And so if you think about one side, the y-axis as human productivity and the x-axis as stress, it's a bell-shaped curve. So when we are to the left of the curve, we're not feeling very motivated, we're bored, we're apathetic, chances are you're not going to be very productive. When you are to the far right of the curve, you're highly stressed, you're anxious, many of us are feeling this way, you're not going to be very productive. There is a sweet spot of human productivity right in the middle of that bell-shaped curve, and that is the Goldilocks principle, the just right part of stress and human productivity. Now, many of us are to the right of the curve. We are anxious and keyed up and stressed out, and we're not very productive. So how do we bring the science into everyday life and apply it to our life? We can't just chill out and go for a month to Bali for a surfing holiday. Wish I could. Can't do it. Can't, spend 6 months eating my way through Italy or hanging out in the Himalayas in a retreat. All of these things are my dreams. You have financial constraints. You have constraints with your family, obligations, all of these things. And so we can't do all of those things to suddenly scale back into that sweet spot of human productivity. So what can we do? We can honor our breaks. And there was a study by Microsoft done not too long ago, which showed that even taking 10-minute breaks, 3 to 4 10-minute breaks throughout the day, can have a cumulative impact on your stress and can help with your mood, productivity, sense of engagement. So it's not breaks are nice to have. They should be an essential part of your workday because it helps manage your stress in the workday. It is a way to honor your breaks, to get back into that sweet spot of human productivity so that you can have just right stress. And with that idea of just right stress, I want to make a point that not all stress is bad. Stress isn't the enemy. Our cultural perception of it is. There is good stress and bad stress. Good stress is adaptive stress. That's the scientific term for healthy, good stress. Bad stress is maladaptive stress. That is the scientific term. Everything good in your life was created because of a little bit of stress. Like you started this podcast, something really positive. You met your girlfriend, also something positive. You may have made a new friend as an adult, wonderful and positive. Cheering for your favorite sports team, also a positive thing. Now, when we think of the word stress in modern culture, we think about bad stress. Bad stress are all of the things that we already know, right? Like the feelings that we've talked about. But the goal of life is not to live a life without stress, because that is biologically impossible. Our brains and our bodies need stress to survive. It is to live a life with healthy, manageable stress. It's to move away from unhealthy stress back to healthy stress.
My calendar, and people see my calendar a lot because we have this vlog channel. My calendar is full of just back to back to back to back meetings. I actually had a conversation with my assistant the other day. I was like, when you look at my calendar, there's actually not a 60-second gap between meetings, which means I'm continually late because meetings always run over. And also you have to travel between one meeting to the next, or at least you might have to load up Zoom or something, which takes 30 seconds. So I'm going to be 30 seconds late because there's not a gap. And when I was reading in your book about this Microsoft study that compared brain scans of people who were in back-to-back meetings with those who took short breaks, and they found that the group taking short breaks experienced significantly less stress, it made a lot of sense to me, because when I'm back to back to back to back to back to back to back, it's kind of like your kettle example. You have I'll put it on the screen, the kettle analogy of stress. I just feel like it's filling up with steam, And then in the kettle analogy, when the steam comes out of the nose of the kettle, that's kind of when you let some of the stress out. So taking those gaps.
Opening the lever.
Oh, you can open the lever. That also lets the stress out. That's what I don't have in my day. I don't have breaks. When this podcast ends, right? People will come through this door over there, one by one, and Jack's laughing because he knows he's one of them. He's closer, so he gets in first. I have 17 things that I need to do for these people. I won't even be able to make it to the toilet because someone's going to want me to review something. And that's my day every day.
You have to build in breaks. And even if that means that you're putting it in your calendar, again, the study was 10 minutes. You can do as little as 10 seconds, that research has shown. Why? Because neural consolidation, again, a very fancy scientific term, but it simply means that when we are on the go and moving, we are not always learning. And so when do you want to learn? Neural consolidation means that there's information floating in our brains, and consolidation your brain lays down, cements the information into knowledge, right? So there's information and knowledge. And neural consolidation is the process of the cementing of new information. And taking a break helps to do that.
Wait, so if I'm listening to a podcast and something profound just gets said, I should pause the podcast and just wait 10 seconds to help with the neural consolidation.
That would be wonderful.